Welcome to another episode of the Just Elite podcast. And with me today is Steph Chung. Steph, welcome to the episode. It's such a pleasure to have you here. You've had a very exciting and somewhat disappointing season. Let's start with what happened. You had a very, very good start to the season, a good open, good qualifier, and then the Granite Games. Tell us about what happened there.
Yeah, it was by all means a good season. Everything was kind of going well. And then event one of the Granite Games was a 1 rep max snatch, and I hurt my elbow on my last lift.
What exactly happened? You said you hurt it. Is it something that you've been struggling with? Was it a weak spot, or was this completely out of the blue?
Not at all. Until now, I've never had any problems with my elbow. So it was completely out of the blue. I've never even really considered my elbows as something that was a weak spot. Of course, we warm everything up, but I was more worried about my back. My back flares up from time to time, and we had a long time to wait before the snatch event. We were staged for about 20 minutes. So between the last time we touched a barbell in warm-up area and the time we got out there was quite a long time. So I was focused on my lower body, keeping my back, my hips, my legs warm. I wasn't so concerned about my shoulders. My shoulders have always been pretty good in snatch. So my physio assessed me right after the event, and we still think that it's a medial elbow strain of the UCL.
And is that quite serious? I mean, we all know that you were strapped up, or you had some form of cast around your elbow for the rest of the weekend. Obviously it was sore, and you could see, they were after some events, you had to put it in ice and so on. So is this now something that's going to be a problem going forward, or, is it long-term? Was it just something that can be fixed?
God, I certainly hope it's not long-term. It's not as serious as it could have been. It could have been torn. I could have dislocated it. I think I did feel a pop when I caught the snatch. That's how I felt and heard a pop. So that's what cued me in that there was something wrong. But it went back in. I didn't need it relocated or anything like that. So it definitely could have been worse, which would have made it potentially a more long-term injury. For now, it's something that we're just trying to rehab the best that we can. My season ended after the last chance qualifier, so I was able to take time off, not do any of the movements that kind of irritated it the most. Over that weekend, obviously, it was not ideal to be competing with a hurt elbow. I had almost no range of motion. I tell everyone that they pushed back competition on Saturday because of the heat. So we were supposed to compete, early afternoon, and they moved us to early evening. And those extra hours made all the difference. I think I probably would have had to withdraw if we had to compete that early. I woke up and I definitely couldn't straighten it all the way. I couldn't even bend my elbow enough to touch my ear. That much flexion was impossible. And everything hurt. So my physio did a lot of work on me that day, Friday night and into Saturday morning, to just get it to somewhere that was functional. And we had no idea. He thought it was stable. It felt stable in his testing, but there were definitely movements on Saturday that we were unsure if I would be able to complete. We had to take it event by event.
I mean, we also, if you watch the games, to the listeners and the people that are listening on the podcast, we saw a devastating elbow dislocation at the games with Withdrawal. So we know, the elbow it's something that can get really, really hurt. But that must have been devastating. Steve, seeing that you also said that this will be your last season. I'm saying last because you're not completely retiring. Having your eyes set on this, you changing your career path for the moment, for the next 2 years. Talk to us about that moment when you realized, waking up on the Friday, not even being able to do this, and knowing that this is my chance, and all eyes on you. Everybody thought, this is your year to hit the podium and make it back to the games.
Yeah, it was frustrating for sure. Certainly during that weekend, there was a roller coaster of emotions. I did very well in testing on the second event, the Friday night event. And I clearly did not do very well on the competition floor, mainly because my arm wouldn't lock out. It was a funny, like, my brain kind of shut off function to one side. So my brain was saying, like, lock out the weight, and my body was just not responding. So that night, of course, it looked like everything was done. I'm not going to be able to perform the rest of the weekend. I can barely, like, I can't do my hair because I can't touch, my head with my arm. And then you start to project out, like, this was my last season, this was my last shot. How disappointing is that, But I think getting back into the mindset of event by event was helpful. Remembering that, it's a temporary retirement, and I am shifting my focus to something not worse, not necessarily better, but different, and something definitely that has been a goal for a long time. So that helped keep me in the game a little bit in the competition. And, now I think it's fortunate that I have a little bit of time off to recover my body. And hopefully when I come back to competition, I'll just be feeling even better.
Steph, having an injury like that and waking up to, to the restrictive movement and so on, the basic thing, the normal thing is to think is, maybe for health and safety, I should withdraw from the competition, because what can happen now is long-term injury. It's not just a training day. It's, it's hectic competition over 3 days. Why not just, okay, it's not a simple question, but did the thought cross your mind to just withdraw?
Absolutely. It was probably the first and foremost question on our minds. And when I tell people, it sounds like so cool to be like, oh, you competed on an injury and whatnot. But if it were a normal training day, I would have completely stopped. It's like, competition is very unique in that we kind of have to put aside what our body says. We spend so much time listening to our bodies in training every day, as you should, as anyone should. You have to listen to what your body is telling you, the feedback it's giving you. But in competition, it's different. The circumstances are different. It's a little bit higher stakes. You only have one shot, and you kind of have to put that aside. Now, that being said, I always have the mentality that if you get injured or if something is hurting, you have to assess whether you're going to do more damage to it by continuing. So in a competition, the question of whether to withdraw or not is always based on, okay, what is the injury now? And is there a risk? Is it functional? Can I physically do whatever is left in the weekend? And then the second question is, am I going to injure myself further? I think there's always a risk of injuring yourself further if you're already coming in with an injury. Mm-hmm. But, I think it's pretty rare that anyone comes into a competition without some kind of injury, something bothering them, right? So it's like, do I increase my risk of injuring myself further? I was super lucky to have my physiotherapist there who was able to help me, like, determine that. And we did regular checks. Like, every single time he treated me, he was, checking the stability, checking, do you feel like you have good stability in your elbow, or is it, unstable, and therefore any weight that you put on it is, up in the air, whether it's going to dislocate or not. He assessed that it was stable. It felt stable to me. We did a lot of warm up, specifically like the ring muscle ups. That was a big thing. Like, we were testing whether I could do bench dips and whether I could transition and all of these things before I actually got in the rings. And even when I got in the rings, I looked at my husband, who was my coach that weekend, and I like took a big breath and I was like, oh, because you're thinking, like, if it's not stable, you're gonna just like fall through these rings, like, but it was fine. So that's kind of in competition. That's how I assess it. It was the same in 2018 when I broke my ankle prior to the games. The doctors, I went and saw a surgeon. I went and saw an orthopod, and he took scans, and I said, if I compete on this, do I risk anything? Like, what's the risk? And he said, you're probably, maybe you increase. I had an avulsion fracture that year. So tiny separation of the end of the bone because the tendon kind of popped it off the end. He said, you might increase the gap between the bones, but ultimately, as long as you don't tear the joint capsule, you're ultimately looking at kind of the same recovery. So that's where my head goes, is if I were to risk further injury, severe further injury, then the decision would have been to withdraw. So I was very fortunate that my injury was not as severe as Brooke's, and I certainly hope that she gets better really soon.
Definitely. And obviously you avoided surgery. Now, Steph, obviously not the ending to that weekend that you hoped for, but then you had the chance to compete in another online competition that so many of us dreaded this year, the Last Chance Qualifier. Talk to us through that weekend. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you got your second attempt to try and make it back there. How did that weekend go? I mean, you didn't have a lot of time before you got to do the Last Chance Qualifier.
No, I had about a month from Granite Games, and so that's including a little bit of a deload week that you just have to take. And actually, during that deload week, I also tweaked my back, so I was not doing so well going into the Last Chance Qualifier. It was when I tweak my back, it's kind of just a flare up of my nervous system more than anything. It's not necessarily severe, but everything locks down. So I couldn't like touch my toes. I couldn't stand up from the couch, that kind of stuff, like very basic stuff. So the question of being able to do burpees, the question of like being able to lift any kind of weight off the ground, like right up until the Last Chance Qualifier was a huge question mark. That was a huge issue. So the workouts were not great for someone with an elbow and a back injury. I will say that 3RM deadlift, dead stop from the floor, was not, I hadn't pulled weight from the floor until the week beforehand. I hadn't pulled anything from the floor. So the Last Chance Qualifier didn't go great, I would say, for sure. I mean, both in terms of like where I finished on the leaderboard, but also my personal expectations. You never hope to have a competition that your performances just don't live up to what you expect from yourself. But I was really really proud of myself at Granite Games for fighting back into that position and to get myself into that position. I think it was more of a character growth moment. And even though the Last Chance Qualifier didn't go well, that the Granite Games is still a really positive memory in my mind, because I was able to push through. I got through the whole weekend. I was so grateful to have an in-person competition again. Even though I had to end my season on an online qualifier, it was like the memories of the stadium and being in lanes next to people and that push. That's really the best thing I could have asked for in this quote unquote final season.
Now, I love it that you keep on saying how you end your season and not your career. I think it's important to note. And you also mentioned it on social media that you're going into semi-retirement or super long off season. So it's good to know that you're not leaving the sport, and you're known as the comeback kid. Can you tell us where did that come from, just for the listeners and the people watching that don't know where that come from?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that now we have to, like, that I guess is considered CrossFit history. We have to dig back into, it's been a minute. And so 2018 at regionals, the last year where they had regionals, I was competing in Meridian, and the first day went very, very badly for me. I mean, like very badly, which we knew was going to happen. It wasn't the greatest workouts for me. It was 333 on the runner, which is a long way to run. That was a long distance I'd ever run on a run.
That was horrible. Like,
it was
I've
horrible.
never done it, but just watching it, I saw somebody vomit straight after that. I remember so clearly watching it.
Yes.
Sorry, continue.
No, it was that's exactly as horrible as it was. It was just, I think the time cap was like 45 or 48 minutes, like something extreme. There were people who got capped on it, so it really did go that long. So that wasn't a great one for me. Just between like all the modalities, monostructural is not great for me. And then the next was Linda, which is bench press, deadlift, bench press, and cleans. That also does not go very well for me because I, until that point, had not trained bench press. So we kind of knew that like day one was going to be a struggle. So I went into day 2 on Saturday in, I think, the second heat. I was in like 27th, like I was really low. And then through the weekend, I climbed my way back. I think I had some like 4th place finishes, some, top 5 finishes, so that Sunday I climbed my way back into the top heat. I won the first event on Sunday, and that put me in the position to then qualify for the games after finishing day one in 27th place, which was obviously not where anyone wants to be when they want to make the games. And then it was fortunate I actually won the event on Sunday morning, because it was a tie break for the game spot, and that event win put me in the tie break position.
That's amazing. There's another athlete that's also known as the comeback kid, Cole Sager, and digging yourself out of a hole like that, it's not ideal. We know Pat Vellner does the same thing on his first day at the games every single year, and then digging yourself out of that is not great, but coming out at the end is always rewarding. But let's go back. Your CrossFit, you're in semi-retirement. Let's go back a bit. Talk to us about where it all started. You had a gymnastics career.
Yep.
And how did that transition into CrossFit then?
Sure. So when I was young, I started gymnastics around the age of 3. I was really young, and I did it all through my young life. I had a back injury when I was about 12, which kind of took me off track. And I did come back for a season after that and was somewhat competitive, but it kind of threw everything for a loop in my career. So I did a little bit of gymnastics in college. I did club gymnastics at Cornell, which was really fun. A little more casual than the competitive one I was used to. And then I needed something to do after college, because you age out of gymnastics. Like, college is pretty much it for a lot of people. Just too hard on the body. And so my mom said, I was so sick of going to like Planet Fitness and just like walking on a treadmill, staring at weights, not really knowing what to do with them. So a CrossFit gym opened in our town. It was actually Spencer Hendel's gym at the time. He had just opened it. And so, I went and I tried a class. My brother came with me, poor guy, who was so nice, never went back. And then that's how, I loved it.
You either love it or you never go back. Or you're addicted for life, or you turn around and you walk away.
Yeah. And I think he'd be really good at it. It just like was a lot for our first day. And I loved getting my butt kicked by it, but he was definitely like, yeah, I'm all set. I'm good. I liked the variety of movements. They explained the philosophy of CrossFit is like a great workout in under an hour. I think our workout was like 13 minutes and I was dead. Like, I'd never done something that intense and that short. Obviously a gymnastics floor routine is a bit intense, but I'd never done that in the gym. I'd always like walked on the treadmill for 90 minutes, maybe a little bit of running. It was cool to know that you could go to the gym and like get this satisfactory workout in such a short amount of time. And I loved the challenge of learning new things. There were so many things that I didn't know how to do. I'd never lifted a barbell. I barely knew how to use dumbbells. The gymnastics was of course familiar to me. So there was something to like keep me in it, like the days with toes to bar and kipping pull-ups and things like that. Like, those were the days that I really enjoyed because of my background. But there's also something really cool about being an adult, and learning something new, like a new fitness skill that you didn't know your body could handle. So that's what drew me in and what kept me ultimately.
Yeah. And then obviously you've been competing from a very young age. So was competing in this sport did it just come natural? That was like the natural organic path for you to follow? Or was there like you were at the gym with Spencer Hendel, was that like kind of, okay, Steph, you've got some true potential here, let's get you competing?
Not at all at first, for sure. They were really great. So I kind of consider my first 2 starting gyms, Spencer's gym and a gym in Ithaca, New York called CrossFit Palace. It's actually owned by Tim Paulson and Eamon Coyne. Eamon competed in the Masters division this year, and Tim was an individual. So I had some really good coaches starting out, and they really didn't push me. I'm competitive by nature, but in gymnastics, it's competition with yourself. It's an individual sport, at least in, not in college, but when you're young, it's an individual sport. You're kind of just competing to be a better version of you. And I kind of applied that to CrossFit in the beginning. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I wouldn't say I was particularly dedicated. We joke all the time that when I was in college, I would like do the classic cherry picking the workout, late cancel because I didn't want to get out of bed. I would only go like 2 or 3 times a week and only do the workouts with movements that I like to do. I would never put weight on my bar, all this stuff.
Almost like the rest of us, like the rest of the average people. That's what we do.
Exactly. I was like your normal gym class CrossFitter. And as a coach for so many years, I was talking with Eamon about 3 years after I left their gym. I was living in the Middle East coaching, and I was like, I was the worst member. I was like, I think about all the things that I hate that our members do, and I did like every single one of those. Like that was me. So yeah, totally guilty. But then when I moved to the Middle East, like CrossFit was still recreational for me. It was just a way to like make friends and socialize and get a good workout. I would like that aspect too, of course. I met my husband. He was managing the gyms in Qatar. He's now my husband. And the group of people that I kind of fell in with there did, they trained at the same time all together. They did a little bit of like skill and strength plus the workout. So it was fun. I had a lot of time. So I ended up just staying in the gym with them, doing a little bit more work. It was easy to compete in the Middle East. Like, it's easy to travel there, and the level of competitors was like a little bit lower than the US just because it was a newer sport. So it was a little bit easier to like get to these in-person competitions. And so the fact that I like could do toes to bar and pull-ups was a big plus. So Rob was like, hey, maybe you should like try to compete. Like at least it's a way to travel and see the region and like get to know people and whatnot. So we started kind of like doing local competitions. I really liked it. It was really hard. So therefore I was like, okay, well, I want to get better at it because it's really hard. And then it grew into like, eventually it was like, well, maybe you can make regionals. And that would be pretty fun because like how many people, in the US get to say that they made regionals? Not that many, because the field is so big. And that's where it all kind of was born out of. So a long way around your question is I always had that competitive nature. And so I think it was easy to like convince me that I should try. But I think if I had been living in the US or, like if I had less time or whatnot, it would have been harder to convince me that like, no, you should make this your living. You should like do this full time, dedicate, all of your energy to it. And with my back injury, I should mention that when I was 12, I got injured in gymnastics and I was really hesitant to like lift any weights because of it. I just didn't want to go back to that place. And so I remember doing like in my early days, I tried a GHD sit up, and because I had like no stability anywhere, I wasn't like strong. I did it and it really hurt my back. Like it didn't feel very good. And I was like, oh, I can never compete. I had just seen like Spencer at 2014 regionals and they did a bunch of GHD. And I was like, well, if I can't do these, like I'll never be able to compete. So I might as well just have fun. And that's what kind of shifted my mindset towards like, well, we'll just do this for fun rather than to compete. Cause you'll never be able to do that. Like your back is injured. You have this history, like you'll just never, your body will never be able to tolerate high level competition. But here we are. I'm like one of those testimonials. It's like, it's for everyone. Like even if you've had an injury, it's for you too.
So with this competitive nature and the awesome way how you found yourself into competing at the highest level in our sport, ending your season back to 2021 now, the way you did, is that hunger even bigger now, knowing that you didn't get your, that last chance to perform on the biggest stage of them all, to most probably come back in a few years' time?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always like whenever you feel like you have unfinished business, you're like, but I want to do it now. It's like after the last chance qualifier or in seasons past when I didn't qualify for the games, the sentiment was like, well, I'm going to start training right now for next year, because I'm going to get ahead. I'm not going to take time off. I'm going to like have that competitive edge, which obviously is not a good long-term strategy. So it was a little bit hard to deal with the like, well, you have 2 years, until you're going to be back, until you have your shot again. So that knowing that there was so much lag time before I'll have another chance was tough. I have to say it was tough, and that competitive person in me was like, oh, well, maybe I can fit in a competition next year. Rob and I talked about it and we're like, it really doesn't make sense with my school schedule. It's just not going to be possible for me to travel. But I think it's useful to have that. Like, I don't think of it as like stagnant energy. I just think of it as like, you didn't have your chance now, but you'll have your chance again. And if you channel it into positive, I tell everyone, like, if you channel that into positive places, like, it can do a lot for you. If you just like let it sit and kind of fester, then it will just haunt you for a long time. That's the negative side. So yeah, in workouts now that I'm doing, like, am I thinking about competition? No. But when I'm like suffering on the assault bike, am I thinking about like staying fit for the next 2 years so that I can like compete again? Like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I use that to fuel me when the workout's really hard, or like I want to slow down. And when you're not competing, like, yeah, you can slow down. Like, what does that hurt you? It only hurts yourself. And so when I need that extra little push, I do think like, don't lose it. You're going to be back in 2 years and you're going to be kicking yourself for all those workouts that you just like walked through rather than sprinted.
Definitely. Now, we've been talking about your semi-retirement in 2 years, but tell us about what is going to happen in these 2 years for the listeners and the people on YouTube watching that they don't know what the hell is going on. Where's Steph going for 2 years?
Disappearing off the face of the earth for 2 years. No, I'm starting PA school. So in the US, physician assistant associate is a mid-level provider role. So in between, the MD, the doctor is the highest level provider, and then you have PAs and NPs. So I'm going to school to be a PA, which will mean that I'm in school from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. For the first year. So we start in early September and we'll go through next August. Taking classes, we'll be in the classroom and obviously in labs and simulations and things like that, but learning all of our like didactic work. And then starting in next August, we'll go into our clinical rotations, and that goes for a whole year. So we'll go from August to August in our clinical rotations in a wide variety of fields and specialties. And then I'll be able to sit for my licensure boards that next fall, so fall 2023. And then I'll be able to apply for jobs.
And then after all of this time, you just gave us like just a slight timeline and the hours that you will be busy. When you actually start applying for work, what will your hours be when you go into the workforce? Will it also be 8 to 6?
That's a great question. So maybe a lot can change in 2 years, and it does vary based on specialty and how many, what the department looks like, how many nurses you have, maybe medical residents and all this. But a very common work week for PAs is 4 days of 10 hours. So yeah, so it might be 8 to 6. It might be overnight. It might, depending on where you work, it could be any time of the day. But 4 days on of 10 hours each is pretty typical. Some do 3 days of 12 hours. And any current PAs could weigh in on how much they work. I'm sure there are some that do, 5 days or take call shifts and things like that. But it is a little bit more flexible in terms of like work-life balance in that way. At least so I've been told. So hopefully that's why I'm saying in 2 years, maybe when I have a normal job, it would be easier to rearrange my schedule for travel.
And do you have an idea of what you will be specializing in?
I don't yet. I'm keeping an open mind. I have ideas of the specialties that are most interesting to me, but we learn about everything. So the PA education is broad. So I don't want to close myself off to a certain specialty with one in mind and then hit clinical rotations, say like, oh, wow, I actually really like, ophthalmology. And I didn't think I would like that. I want to be open to the experience. I want to learn everything about different fields, because I really had limited experience in different areas. I focused most of my work in orthopedics. And then this past year, I was working cardiology, which was fascinating as well. But I want to make sure that I have that well-rounded, open-minded view so that when I'm applying to jobs, maybe there's one in a field that I wasn't expecting to like.
Now, just for the people listening as well, like people think, okay, but Steph, if you love CrossFit so much, you'll make time. I had an interview with Taylor Williamson from Team Mayhem that obviously won this year, and she's also in PA school, and she was actually advised by her school or asked, or actually told that you can't compete, you cannot do CrossFit, which she obviously didn't listen to, and it turned out quite great for her in this instance. But just listening to it, to the hours, Steph, that is a lot of long hours, to focus on and do sport on the side. So balancing just one workout with hours like that, being on your feet for 10 hours or just sitting in the class, like when would you even train? Right.
So that's also a good question. And I've dedicated a lot of thought to my schedule because working out, it's your anchor to sanity. I tell people that all the time. It's literally how I stay balanced, and sitting for 10 hours is something that's so foreign to me now at this point in my life, after years of competing, that I think I will just fall apart if I don't work out. I will probably get, the hour a day, like most people do. In and out, very efficient, just get to what I need to. And I think that I really do believe that I can maintain my fitness that way. I think that everyone can. It's just about being intentional with both your programming, so what you're doing, and also how you're doing it. Intensity goes a long way. I think people, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think people see like, oh, games athlete, like to be competitive, you have to just add more volume, you have to do more. And I don't know that that's always the answer. I think it is in certain cases, in certain circumstances. But for me, where I've been doing this for so long, I really think that it's about skill maintenance. It's about intensity in the workouts that I'm doing. So, I'm not doing 3 Metcons a day, but that one is going to be like, 100% of my effort versus maybe 75% distributed across 3 Metcons. So I really think the hour a day is not the issue. The reason that I am taking time off competition is for the travel. I haven't talked to Taylor. I don't know how she did it, but like for Granite Games, I traveled Wednesday to Monday, and with school Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, like that's a lot of class to miss. I don't, maybe it's doable. I haven't met my professors. I don't know what my classes will be. For now, though, I think it's best for me to just focus my energy into school, and, rather than having the question mark of like, oh, will I be able to do it? Will I not? I'm just taking the step back and saying, I'm going to focus on being the best PA that I can be, learning the most, and not have the distraction of competition and then digging myself out of the hole of missing so much class. At least for the year. Maybe it's different in clinical years. I don't know. But yeah, I think the fitness will be fine. It's really the time dedication that you need to compete at a high level. You have to take so much time off.
No, look, absolutely. What Taylor said, and you can't compare the two, because she's in her final year, and I mean you only starting out. But I can tell you, and in her own words, it was very stressful. It was insane. Balancing competing, PA school, and a marriage can definitely not be fun. I want to move on to something else. Back in 2020, the first time that we as a community heard about the Professional Fitness Athlete Association. You're an executive committee member. Are you still on the board? What's happening with that? Tell us about that and progress that's been made within this committee for the sport.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. So yes, the answer is yes. I am still on the executive board. we are looking to maybe run elections or kind of turn over the board for next year. It's been just about over a year, which we kind of knew we would, was the time commitment to get things off the ground. But we would like some new opinions, new voices kind of injected into the conversation. So perhaps I will be on that next board, perhaps I won't. I think what we've done this year has been really great. You know, it was the first year of anything is just about establishing yourself as a legitimate organization. And I think that we did that. You know, we have really, really productive conversations with CrossFit HQ that, in my, at least to my knowledge, has never been done between athletes and CrossFit in the past. So we were able to, by working together with CrossFit, we were able to kind of break down that wall. And even though, you know, it was only 9 of us speaking with them every month, there's now this this conversation going on where they're listening to our feedback, what we have to say, and then we're able to hear their intentions and their thought process, planning process, and relay that information as it's relevant to athletes. So, and that's a level of communication that we just haven't had in the past, which I think has created not all of the problems, but a lot of them. You know, it's just an issue with communication and misunderstanding. So I think aside from any, you know, concrete checks off the list, that's a huge one, is that we've created this lasting relationship and avenue for communication going forward. In terms of what we were able to do, I think a lot of it was behind the scenes this year. We did try to share it with athletes, but a lot of it was, like I said, just kind of the minutia of establishing ourselves. So we provided recommendations for things like workout releases, timelines for that. When we were, you know, we would provide suggestions for example, quarterfinals of, you know, when are you going to announce the workouts? What do the windows look like? What does the appeals process look like? How can that be refined? And, you know, I think this season did go more smoothly than previous seasons. Of course, it's a new format, so there are going to be hitches and issues. But you know, it's like before, we would just have HQ told us what to do, and you either did it or you didn't. If you liked it, it didn't matter. Someone else would fill your spot. I think now there's a much better, you know, athletes have an investment in CrossFit, or at least they are hearing what athletes would like and what, from our perspective, what matters. And so I think we'll see a lot of really important changes in coming seasons as they're able to plan the whole season, and this format kind of solidifies itself, and they're keeping our preferences in mind. So I know it's a little bit vague. There were very concrete things that we told them. We actually just had a call with them about the games and our feedback. And I think they'll take those things going forward. And it just it'll hopefully make the sport more professional, a lot more accessible, and better. I wish it would affect us, you know, like the generation of athletes, like I wish it would affect us, but it's going to be really, really great for people down the line.
Definitely. I think we all need to remember that it's still such a young sport. And I know a lot of the athletes that they've been talking about something like this, association like this, for many, many years, even though, you know, our sport has been only competitive for a few years. But going forward, this can only grow, this can only get better, and getting the feedback and you know, the opinions of athletes on the floor, you know, competing each year is definitely very important, especially when it comes to the planning of the season. I've had numerous conversations with athletes that just, you know, the season since 2019, when, you know, when regionals became redundant, and everything has just been so uncertain. So I think it's a very good place to start. So you say that even though you are retiring, semi-retirement, you will still be part of this association. Now, let's keep that in mind and go down to all your sponsors. What is the communication with your sponsors now that you won't be competing for quite, you know, an unknown number of years, even though you can plan, you know, to come back in 2 years, but not knowing your schedule? What is the conversation like? And is that something that you were worried about?
It was definitely a point of concern, something that I knew I had to address with them, saying, giving them the heads up, like, hey, I'm taking time off. I'm no longer going to be, quote unquote, a professional athlete. We had those conversations, and I have to say that all of my sponsors are amazing. They're just so great, so understanding. Every single one of them has been overwhelmingly excited for me in this new chapter. And so for now, they're all continuing to support me through school. Of course, it would be understandable if they didn't. I was prepared for that, given that my entire career is changing. But I think the brands that I've been able to partner with, I've been so, so lucky to have them on board. I think it speaks to like the level of their people. Like they are, yes, they're business people. They're thinking about business, but they're also people. So they're, they've all expressed the desire to continue to support me, have me on the team, have them represent the brand. And I come back to like how lucky I am to partner with brands that have their athletes' best interests in mind, as well as their business interests, not simply, numbers on a page. It's so much more than that. And that's why I call them, partnerships, not sponsorships, because it really is supportive back and forth. They support me, and then I do my very best to support them and be a representative of their brand. Definitely. So yes, so far it looks like that's all pretty stable.
Another reason to come back, Steph. I'm just putting it out there. So Steph, I have two questions from a fan, somebody that's a really, really big fan of yours, and I knew like he really, he's been supporting your career and he looks up to you as an athlete. So I asked him if you could ask Steph two questions, what would it be? So his first question, this is Craig Hawks. Shout out to Craig. Craig asked about your nutrition plan. Like what nutrition plan you're on? I know there's different apps that a lot of these top athletes you guys are following. What does your nutrition look like to perform at the highest level?
That is a great and very complicated question, which is why I don't talk about it a lot because there's a lot of stuff out there and it's so different for everyone. For me personally, my nutrition changes a lot based on the time of the season. So I don't adjust my macros kind of within the week. I know there's some plans that have you kind of go up on training days, down on rest days. Mine are stable. So whatever kind of macros I'm dealing with, that's for every day of the week. It's also simpler that way. I don't have the capacity to like vary days by day. In season, I respond to high carbs very well. We've just learned that. I was working with a nutrition company, M2, for a long time, and over the years we just found that my body functions better on high carbs with a little bit lower fat and a normal amount of protein. The standard is like one gram per day per pound of body weight. I think it's about right around there. So during competition season, we would tweak it. It would go, my carbs would pretty much go up. Everything else would basically stay unless I just needed more calories. Off season, we bring it down based on my level of energy. I'm a huge fan of macros. I'm very type A, so it is just easy. There's no ambiguity. It's like you hit your numbers or you don't. I use my Fitness Pal just because I've used it for so long. I'm really used to it. And I guess that's kind of a basic overview, but I would say nutrition takes time to learn yourself. And it's really like, it's so individual. That's why I avoid talking a little bit about what I've done. I tell people like tips, and things that have worked for me, but it's so individual. And if you do it right, it just takes time to experiment with what works for you. I've talked to athletes who have like double the amount of fat that I have every day and almost no carbs. And I'm like, I have no idea how your body runs on that, but you're clearly doing great. So, that works for you.
And then the
so
second,
I guess,
sorry. No, continue. You guess?
Oh, no, that's it. I guess the only thing that I would add that I've tried recently, I've tried it in the past, and that's why I've come back to it recently, is I intermittent fast now that I'm not training. So I don't eat my first meal until about 11 or 12. And then I'm usually done with dinner by 39-ish. So I have about somewhere between an 8 and a 10-hour feeding window. And it's really just that simple. I just drink a lot of water in the morning. I don't eat until about lunchtime. And then I have all my macros, all my meals, and I finish up around 9 o'clock at night. So
the intermittent fasting, is there something fairly new, and how has it been affecting your body?
It's not a new principle for sure. It's been around for a long time.
No, but I'm talking for you yourself.
Oh, yes. So I used to intermittent fast back when I was a teacher. So when I first moved to Doha, 2014, 15. So like a long time ago now, 7 years. I just like it because it helps me feel really mentally clear in the morning. It also helps me drink more water. So I get through about 3/4 of my day worth of liquid in the morning if I don't eat. And for some reason, it's just a struggle like all day to drink enough water if I eat really early. That's just a personal thing that I've noticed. I stopped intermittent fasting when I started training twice a day because I do think it's important to eat to fuel correctly for training, especially for women. Training fasted has been, women are highly variable, but it's been shown to be kind of a stress response if you fast too much. So I stopped it when I started training, and now that I've been back at the hospital, it just worked with my schedule. So I would, you don't get a break from about 7:30 until 11:30 noontime. So it's just easier to wait, drink more water, eat my full lunch, when it was time. And then I was in bed by 9:30. So my dinner had to be done by 8:30 or 9. And I've just continued through since being kind of off season. It just works well for me. I'm busy in the morning and then I eat at lunch.
And then the last question, also from Craig and from myself, is regarding your mindset. He asked specifically about your competition mindset and how you carry yourself in situations where things might not go your way. Let's take the Granite Games, for instance, where the very first workout, you had an injury, but you pushed through, you stayed calm, you took it workout for workout. So during your career up to this point, did you have a mind, did you have a coach that worked with you, a sports psychologist or something, or how do you prepare your mindset and work with your mindset leading up to a competition?
That's a good question. I don't have, I guess, a really good answer for it. I guess I would say like surrounding yourself with good people matters a lot. Having people who are putting the right kinds of ideas into your mind, like, for example, my husband will always say, like, when I'm feeling stressed or anxious about stuff, he'll just bring me back to like, remember why you do this. You're not doing this for anyone else other than you. This is for you compete because you want to, prove something to yourself, or, you enjoy it. Bring yourself back to that and remember why, like, this is all going to be worth it. Instead of saying like, well, like your whole year will have been for nothing if you don't qualify. That's, I guess, the same sentiment of like, remember why you're doing this and why you push yourself, but they're two different sides of it. So that's really helpful to have him ground me every once in a while. My coach, Yami from the training plan, is also pretty good at mindset. He's more the one that brings me back into like one session at a time. I'm a planner by nature. So I'll look down the road, I'll project into the future, and he really keeps me like, no, like focus on one piece, like as small as one rep at a time, one piece of a movement at a time, and then of course, competition is like, you're focused on one event and that's it. You're not thinking about the rest of the weekend. You're not thinking about how it might play out. You're not projecting. Like, I love to project. I love it. So you're not looking at like, okay, if you place third in this workout, what are your points? And then like, where does that put you for the next day? Like, no, it's this workout, you're going to do your best, not worry about where anyone else falls, and your best is enough. I think for me, at least, I know a lot of people who are competitively motivated are motivated by other people, like you are training to beat this person, or imagine that this person is next to you and like, how fast are they going? That works for me a little bit in training. Sometimes when I'm having a really hard time, I picture like being on a competition floor, and like you imagine as you start to slow down on the bike, someone else speeds up. Like, so I suppose I use little scenarios like that to help me sometimes, but usually the most potent motivator for me is like me versus me. Is like you push to do your best, and then your best is enough. And ultimately, like Rob is really great at reminding me of that, especially before open workouts. I don't know why, like 8 years later, after doing my first open, I still get like super anxious before. And he's always like, you could be doing this in a gym alone. You could be doing this in a class full of members. You could be doing this with the top 5 women at the CrossFit Games. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change your strategy. Like you do do your best, and it's enough. And so I think if that mentality works for you, it certainly works for me. That's my biggest piece of advice on mindset. Just do it for you.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah, it's helpful to deviate. I have to say, like I've had to learn that. You have to learn how to when to deviate, when it's useful. But for me, a lot of the times, like especially in training, it's just not useful. Like you have to focus on you. You have to focus on doing what's right for you. Don't worry about anyone else's training. Don't worry about, how fast they're pushing in a Metcon. Don't let it get you off your plan. If you have a good plan, the plan that's the best one for you, then you stick with it.
Awesome. Steph, where can the listeners and the YouTube watchers follow you on social media? Are you active on Instagram? What is your handle, and where else can they see what you're up to now that you're moving direct, you're changing course just for a few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the most active on Instagram. My handle is Steph Chung 2, all one word. I do have a Facebook athlete page, Steph Chung, although, I'm a little bit less active on Facebook, and I have not explored YouTube so much yet. It's mostly videos of me doing qualifiers from years ago and movement demo videos for all of the athletes that I program for. But maybe that'll be a new frontier when I have the time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Just Elite. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please, please, please leave a comment.